If you're struggling with roles and responsibility issues on your projects, you're not alone. And if you're getting ready to write the CAPM or PMP exams, it's a component of the exam that you need to know and get ready to nail. My name's Adam. I'm from Osprey Project Consulting, and I'm going to walk you through some of the roles and responsibilities that you'll find on projects to help you get ready for the PMP exam and to deal with one of the most common issues facing projects today. So let's dive in. One of the most common themes I see in my project consulting practice is issues around roles and responsibility. In order to better understand the problem or the root problem with roles and responsibilities, you have to understand projects in general. The definition of a project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to produce a unique or novel product. What that means is projects have finite end dates. All projects end, and because of that, all projects are funded, which means all projects have some type of risk. Typically, it's financial risks or timeline-related risks. And those risks create a bit of a pressure cooker for project teams. And all of a sudden, that stuff can boil over and all sorts of human resource-related issues can come to fruition. Projects themselves are temporary, and so are project teams. Oftentimes, the resources you need on a project aren't there when you start. You'll slowly add on new team members as the project goes through, and those project team members will roll off throughout the life of the project. So you'll encounter things like conflict and disagreement. You'll encounter things like people not knowing what they're supposed to do, different ways of working, or one of my personal favorites is two folks moving the entire opposite direction, most often manifested by two people doing the exact same thing without talking to each other, thereby creating duplication of effort, extra work, and a perfect situation for conflict. There's no end to the comparison between project management and sports when it comes to roles and responsibilities. If you were to look at an Olympic rowing team, on the surface, you would just see 4 individuals on a kayak moving in the same direction. In reality, they all have specific roles to play based on their skill set. Everyone needs to know the timing. Everyone has some specialized piece that they bring to the project team. And interestingly, if you look, there's someone on that team called a stroke, which is responsible for making sure everyone has pace and rhythm. In my mind, that's a project manager. If an Olympic rowing team didn't have their roles and responsibilities sorted out, you would have the left side rowing out of sync, causing you guys to spin. If everyone on the rowing team operated independently, you might not get anywhere at all. You could lose the race or tip over. Rowing teams know that they have specialization, and they sort out those specialized traits on land when it's not a high-stakes situation, not in the middle of a race. Project management's the same way. You want to deal with roles and responsibility issues at the very beginning of a project, before team members are even assigned, so that when they come on, they know exactly what seat they're going to be on. I'm not sure where this phrase comes from, but it's burned into my mind. A canoe is no place for an argument. That analogy applies well to project management. If you're sorting out who does what and when in the middle of a project, things are gonna go sideways. Regardless if you're running a project or studying for the PMP, you need to understand the role of the project manager. So let's look at the project manager. Regardless if you're studying for the PMP or running a project, you need to firmly understand what is and what is out of scope of the role of a PM. As defined by the PMBOK, it's the person who's assigned by the performing organization to lead the team that is responsible for achieving the project objective. They are the person who's responsible for leading the team, not responsible for actually doing the work. That's why I'd like to call out the stroke on a rowing team. They set the pace, but they're not actually holding an oar. So what does a PM do? They coach, manage the project team. They manage issues and risks. They're responsible for ensuring all project documentation is done, like the project plan, project charter, scope statement, etc. Key characteristic of a project manager is communication. They are effectively a conduit between technical folks and business folks. So they need to be able to speak articulately in both languages. They need to know just enough technical stuff to identify issues or risks and be able to communicate them articulately to a business executive or a steering committee table, so they understand what is at stake for them. They're very much a bridge between clients and subject matter experts as well. And ultimately, it's a PM who is responsible for the outcome of the project. Lots of misconceptions around what a project manager does. Typically, these misconceptions come from business areas that are working with a PM or operational units. And in my experience, they actually come from the project sponsor more often than not. So what don't they do? Everything. A lot of folks think that project managers do nothing or perhaps just reporting. Couldn't be further from the truth. A project manager needs to do reporting, absolutely, but they're making sure the project budget's on track, the timeline's on track, navigating issues with the team, and ultimately being a leader of the folks doing the work. Key here is they also can't read minds. You need to have folks engaged with the project manager so that the PM can articulate and understand the scope of work before them. So more often than not in my practice, I see this as when a sponsor requests a project, assigns a project manager, and the sponsor just completely disappears. So the PM has no one really to talk to about the rationale behind the project or the underlying business case. And more often than not, a business case isn't even appropriately written. So a PM is not someone who can act in isolation, and they cannot read your mind. PMs are also not subject matter experts. In some industries, they need to be, like engineering or aeronautics, where they're a professional engineer, for example. But more often than not, a project manager is simply a manager of people. So the topic of the project or the industry that the project is within is more often than not irrelevant to the project manager. They are not a subject matter expert. That's why there is a development team. That's why there is a crew doing the work. The PM is simply responsible for making sure the work gets done and is quality out. I cannot stress this enough. If you're going into the exam or in life, a project manager is not a one-person team. Another key role that we need to be aware of, whether or not you're writing that exam or in life, is the role of the project sponsor. In my mind, this is the most misunderstood role in practice. So, according to the PMBOK, project sponsor is a person or group who provides resources and support for the project, program, or portfolio, and is accountable for enabling success. I have seen so many projects go sideways because the project sponsor is missing. They provide the money, but they themselves aren't there helping the project, removing roadblocks, or making sure that everyone is truly up to speed as to what the vision of the project is. Or worse yet, the project sponsor provides the project team and the PM a blue sky, high-level vision that is so ephemeral, it makes it exceptionally challenging for them to bring about a project that actually delivers value. So what does a project sponsor do? They meet regularly with the project manager. If your sponsor isn't meeting regularly with you, that is a massive issue to your project. You need to raise it right away. Good project sponsors support governance and decision-making. They don't become a bottleneck for decision-making processes or get in the way. Their job is to make sure things are happening. So the project sponsor actually has a role on the project. They're not just a recipient of the output. They're the champion of the project. The project manager can't influence high-level executive tables. That's the role of the project sponsor. So when it comes to issues or risks on a project that need to be escalated up in your organization, that's where the project sponsor's value really comes into play. And ultimately, they're engaged with the project team. They're reviewing deliverables. They're providing input into scope of work. They're actively engaged. If you can take one tip away from this, communicate. Communicate in your organization that sponsors have an active role on a project. They are not simply passive recipients of an output of the project. Let's do 3 more basic project management team roles. We've got your project coordinators, your project analysts, and your business analysts. They're all very similar, but they have specialization therein. Across the board, they all provide administrative and documentation support. But when you look at the business analyst, they're providing technical analytics support. They're understanding current state, future state. They're helping define the business case. They're a lot more technical folks. Oftentimes, they're responsible for managing big data on the project itself. They're responsible for gathering and maintaining requirements, workflow review and optimization, process improvement, and testing. Business analysts are very close to the project. Most often in predictive projects, you'll find them at the very beginning of a project, typically around the business case and requirements phases, in the initiation or the planning. In adaptive or agile projects, you'll see business analysts all the way through. They'll participate in every single sprint and release. Project analysts, they provide analytics support, not necessarily on the technical side of things, but they're managing some data as well. They're not going to be responsible for gathering and maintaining requirements. They will produce some strategic recommendations, or they might lead or conduct meetings themselves. Sometimes they're referred to as junior project managers as well. Oftentimes, the PM and the PAs work exceptionally close together, and the lines between the two can get a little blurry. If you're looking to get into project management, most folks try to get into a project analyst style role so they can get more and more experience in facilitation and in leadership, and then work their way up into a full PM position. And last but not least, project coordinators. So admin support, documentation support, a light amount of analytics support as well, but their key functions are basically supporting the project team, supporting project documentation. So they'll help with meeting minutes, scheduling support. They're very much the administrative powerhouse of a project team. If you're looking to get into projects as well, it's going to be coordination or analyst that'll be likely your first step into getting into the project management field. If you're looking for some tips and tricks to help manage issues around roles and responsibilities, I've got a few here as well as some templates. So you could go with memorandums of understanding, transition to ops checklists, the RACI matrix, or responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed, team charters, status meetings, stand-ups, one-on-ones, and a whole bunch more. So if you'd like to learn a little bit more about the templates that can help with roles and responsibilities, like and subscribe to this video or come visit our website. And in the comments, let me know, what do you do to help clarify roles and responsibilities on projects?